The hospital room smelled faintly of lemon polish and warm soup, the kind of smell that should have promised safety. My daughter sat beside me, smiling, her hand brushing mine like everything was perfectly ordinary. Her boyfriend adjusted the tray with polite care, as if nothing in the world could touch us. And then, in that quiet, steady moment, a young nurse passed close by and slipped something beneath my fingers, a folded square of paper, 3 words written in hurried ink. Call the police. Before I go further, I want to ask you something. If you've ever been in a moment where your gut whispered something wasn't right, share your story in the comments, and let me know, where are you watching from right now? Are you in New York, Texas? Maybe overseas? Drop it below. And if you'd like more stories like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. My name is Clara Whitmore, 72 years old. I spent my life teaching children music scales, hymns, the power of harmony. Now I sat in a room at Riverside Memorial Hospital, weak from a heart scare, believing I was in the care of family. My adopted daughter, Amelia, had always been my pride, though lately her smile seemed thinner, stretched like glass about to crack. Beside her, Damien hovered tall and smooth with a grin that carried no warmth. The paper trembled under my palm. My skin burned as if it were faint, though the words were cold enough to freeze my blood. Call the police. My first instinct was disbelief. Surely this was a mistake. But when I lifted my eyes, Ivy, the nurse, stood at the door, her expression smooth, professional, but her gaze locked on mine with a warning I couldn't ignore. A warning that turned the soup before me into poison, the walls into a cage. I could not react. Amelia leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead, her voice sweet as she said, "Mom, you need to eat. Get strong again." Damien poured water into a glass, the ice clinking too loud like shackles. My chest tightened, not from the heart condition, but from the weight of silence I had to carry. I forced my lips into a smile, pretending not to notice the folded paper crumpled beneath my hand. My breath felt thin, as if the room had shrunk. Every sound, the hum of the monitor, the squeak of Amelia's chair, the soft thud of Damien's shoes on the tile grew sharp, amplified, cutting into me. Ivy's eyes had held no pity. They had held urgency, the kind of urgency I remembered from the way a conductor's hand snaps before the crash of the cymbals. This was not a rehearsal. This was the moment everything turned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. Instead, I swallowed the fear like a bitter pill, hiding it behind calm breaths. My fingers curled tight around the note, the edges digging into my skin, an anchor in the storm. My mind raced. Was Amelia part of this? Damien, both. The thought was unbearable, but the truth hovered over me like the shadow of a blade. And so I sat, smiling faintly as though nothing had changed. But in that instant, everything had. The paper's edges still pressed into my palm when Amelia leaned forward, her voice lilting with a sweetness that felt rehearsed. "Mom, let me make you something soothing." She rose, graceful, almost too graceful, and returned moments later with a porcelain cup cradled in both hands. Steam curled upward in delicate ribbons, carrying with it the floral note of jasmine. She set it before me with a smile that did not touch her eyes. "This will help you rest, deeply." The scent struck me first. Jasmine had never been welcome in my house. Arthur, my late husband, once joked it smelled like perfume left too long in a drawer. Amelia knew that. She had wrinkled her nose at it as a girl declared it old lady tea. And yet here, it was steaming beneath my chin. That contradiction rattled inside me, louder than the monitor's steady beep. I lifted the cup slowly, buying time. The porcelain was warm, almost searing against my skin. I breathed in, and there it was, something sharp beneath the flowers, metallic, like pennies on the tongue. My stomach tightened. My mouth went dry. Damien shifted in his chair, watching me. His eyes followed the cup the way a hawk follows a field mouse. Amelia's hands clasped in her lap, but her shoulders were too still, her anticipation heavy as smoke. I tilted the cup, let a thin stream of liquid touch my lips, enough to dampen the rim. Sweet, cloying wrong. I coughed lightly, using the sound as cover, then dabbed at my mouth with a napkin. My hand trembled, but I forced a faint laugh. "Too hot," I said, voice rasping. "Went down the wrong way." Behind the cloth, I spat the liquid into the napkin, folding it quickly, pressing it into my palm. The bitterness clung to my tongue, metallic, invasive, as though it wanted to brand me from the inside. Neither of them spoke. They only watched. The silence was a vice, squeezing tighter with every second. My heart thudded so hard I was afraid the monitor would betray me. I set the cup back down with deliberate calm. I'll let it cool. Amelia's smile flickered, then returned thinner now. Damien's gaze slid to the cup, then back to me. He tapped his fingers against the chair arm, a rhythm too fast, too eager. The napkin in my hand felt like contraband, like a weapon. My mind scrambled, cataloging every detail. Ceramic cup, jasmine scent, copper tang, the napkin damp against my palm. I could almost hear my old librarian's voice inside me, whispering, "Document, preserve, survive." The jasmine steam rose, twisting in the light, sweet and suffocating. My throat tightened. I was surrounded by family, yet I had never felt so utterly alone. And then the realization struck, cold and undeniable. Amelia despised jasmine. She never drank it, never bought it. She once told me it reminded her of funerals. So why this cup tonight? Why insist? The thought landed like a blow. My daughter had handed me not comfort, but a question wrapped in poison, and I was expected to drink the answer. The jasmine still clung to my throat when the door opened with a soft click. Dr. Adrian Kessler entered, tall, calm, immaculate in his white coat. His presence carried authority, the kind that once comforted me. Tonight it pressed down like a weight. He smiled, practiced and gentle, as though I were a child frightened by shadows. "Clara," he said, voice low and smooth, "you've been agitated. That's natural after a cardiac scare. But rest is essential. We've adjusted your sedative slightly. Nothing alarming, just enough to help you sleep soundly. Slightly. Adjusted." Words chosen with precision, soothing as silk. Yet they sliced into me. Adjusted by whose decision I tried to keep my voice steady. I didn't agree to that. His eyes softened, a performance of sympathy. "Your family expressed concern. Amelia and Damien feel you're not resting properly. They want only the best for you. I assured them we'd take care of it." A warmth spread across my chest, not comfort, but anger. My family. Those very hands offering me poison tea were now authorizing chemicals to drown my thoughts. I wanted to shout to tear the IV from my arm, but I felt trapped in my own body, reduced to nods and questions that made me sound frail. Confused. Adrian leaned closer, the fluorescent lights reflected in his glasses, hiding his eyes. "You've always trusted me, haven't you?" His tone was kind, almost paternal. "Let us carry the burden for you now." Trusted. The word echoed like a hymn gone sour. I had trusted him. This man had guided me through heart procedures spoken at Arthur's memorial, even sent flowers. And now his voice lulled me toward obedience, like a lullaby meant to quiet, not comfort. I nodded faintly, masking the fire in my chest. He adjusted the monitor, checked my pulse with cool fingers, then gave a reassuring squeeze to my shoulder before leaving. The door clicked shut. The room swallowed me in silence again. I lay there, replaying his words, questioning my own mind. Had I misheard, misremembered? Maybe the jasmine was only tea. Maybe the note a misunderstanding. His tone made me doubt myself the way gaslight makes flame look like smoke. But then, drifting faintly from the corridor, I caught his voice again. Lower now, stripped of its warmth. I held my breath. "She's suspicious," he said, clipped and cold. A pause. Then words like ice. "It has to be finished tonight." My blood turned to stone. The heart monitor betrayed me with a faster rhythm, frantic beeps slicing the quiet. I pressed a hand to my chest, forcing slow breaths, praying the sound wouldn't draw them back. The doctor, the healer, the man sworn to protect life. He was the one tightening the noose. In that moment, the hospital walls felt less like sanctuary, more like a stage where everyone else knew the script except me. And the final act, it seemed, had already been written. The words I had overheard, "finished tonight," still pulsed in my skull like a drumbeat when the door opened again. My body stiffened, braced for Amelia, Damien, perhaps even Adrian returning to smother me with their plans. But instead, a soft voice whispered, "Mrs. Whitmore." Quickly. Ivy, she stood half in the shadows, her scrubs pale under the dim corridor light. Her eyes darted left, right, then fixed on me with urgency. She beckoned with the smallest tilt of her chin. My legs felt like sandbags, but I forced myself up, clutching the IV pole like a cane. Every beep from the monitor sounded like an alarm announcing my escape. We slipped into a narrow service hallway, then into a supply room that smelled of antiseptic and old linens. Ivy shut the door, locked it, and only then did her facade crack. Her hands trembled as she pulled something from her pocket, 2 small vials sealed with hospital tape. The liquid inside glimmered faintly amber under the weak bulb. "This," she whispered, "is what was in your tea. I tested it before you drank. The air left my lungs. Proof. Not suspicion, not paranoia, proof." She reached again this time, producing her phone. The screen lit her face in ghostly blue as she swiped through images. And there it was, Amelia. My Amelia bent over a tray, her hand steady as she tipped a vial into a teacup. Damien standing nearby, watching the door. The timestamp burned itself into my brain. I gripped the counter behind me to stay upright. My world tilted split between the daughter I raised and the stranger in those photographs. Ivy's voice wavered. I couldn't ignore it. My grandmother, she lost everything because her own sons tricked her. They drugged her, forged papers, stole her house. She never recovered. I swore if I ever saw it happen again, I'd stop it. Her throat tightened, eyes glassy but fierce. You deserve better. The room spun with the weight of her words. For a moment, the nurse and I stood not as patient and caregiver, but as 2 women bound by betrayal across generations. A knock rattled the door. My heart stopped. Ivy froze, then exhaled relief when a deep voice called softly, "It's me." The door opened a crack and a man stepped in. Broad-shouldered uniform shirt stretched across his chest, flashlight clipped to his belt. His presence filled the small room. "Jonas Becker," Ivy said quickly. "Night security, he knows." Jonas gave me a nod, steady and protective. "Don't worry, ma'am. I've seen things too. Strange visitors slipping in medicine cabinets opened after hours. I've been keeping an eye." He glanced toward the hallway. "They won't touch you tonight. Not while I'm here." I pressed my hand to my chest, where my heart still pounded wild and uneven. For the first time in days, I felt a thread of hope pierce the suffocating dark. But hope is fragile. And in the theater of shadows, allies can vanish as quickly as enemies appear. Jonas's presence steadied me, but only for a moment. Hope is fragile, I'd learned, and shadows shift quickly in a place like this. I clutched Ivy's phone, staring at the frozen image of Amelia pouring poison into a cup meant for me. My hand trembled, not from weakness, but from rage. Proof was in my grasp, yet proof Elenu would not protect me. I needed someone who could wield it like a weapon. That night, when the halls had quieted to a low hum of wheels and whispers, I asked Ivy for her phone again. My fingers shook as I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. The line rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice, crisp as ever, answered, "Clara. My God. What's happened, Margaret?" I breathed, tears burning the back of my eyes. I don't have time to explain everything, but they're trying to take me, my home, my name, maybe my life. And Adrian, he's part of it. Silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping as if she had risen to her feet. Listen carefully. Arthur prepared for this. He came to me years ago afraid something like this could happen if you were ever vulnerable. He created a defensive trust. It locks your assets beyond reach unless you willingly sign while of sound mind. And there's a clause, a springing clause activated if foul play is suspected. The words struck me like a hymn breaking through darkness. Arthur. Even from the grave he had seen the danger and laid a shield around me. My throat tightened. For so long I thought his caution was paranoia. Now it was salvation. Margaret's voice sharpened. But we'll need more than the clause. We'll need undeniable evidence, documents, witnesses. If this goes to court, we must strike first, not react. I looked to Ivy, who stood guard by the door, her jaw set. "I have her," I whispered into the phone. "The nurse who risked everything. She has proof." Margaret exhaled a sound of both relief and resolve. "Good. I'll bring in someone else." Ethan Ward, retired detective, now specializes in elder protection. He owes me a favor. If there's rot in that hospital, he'll dig it out." The line went quiet for a beat, then her voice softened. "Clara, listen to me. You are not alone. They want you weak, confused. Don't give them that. Hold steady until we're there." When the call ended, Ivy squeezed my shoulder. Her touch was firm, grounding. Jonas stood at the doorway, eyes scanning the corridor, a sentinel in the dim light. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey cornered in a trap. I had allies now. A lawyer with fire still in her bones, a detective with nothing to lose, a nurse haunted by her grandmother's ruin, a guard who had seen too much, and me, Clara Whitmore, with a heart still beating against the odds. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were preparing for war. The plan was no longer mine alone. It had become a web spun quietly in the shadows by Margaret Ivy Jonas and the man I had yet to meet, Ethan Ward. But when dawn bled into the sterile white of Riverside Memorial, I reminded myself of one truth. The enemy still thought I was weak, half asleep, a lamb waiting for slaughter. I let them think it. That afternoon, the door swung open with the confidence of those who believe the room already belonged to them. Amelia entered first, her heels clicking like a metronome of doom. Damien followed, carrying a slim leather case. And last, Adrian Kessler, immaculate in his white coat, his eyes gleaming with false compassion. Together, they looked less like family and physician and more like wolves draped in church robes. Mother Amelia cooed, laying a stack of papers on my rolling tray. "This is just a formality. Power of attorney, both financial and medical. Nothing frightening. It will ease your burden." Her voice was sugar-laced with arsenic. I lowered my eyes, forcing my breathing into shallow gasps. My hand trembled as I reached toward the papers. "I'll read them." "Later," I whispered, letting the words drag like tired feet on stone. Damien leaned in, his cologne sharp, invasive. "Best to sign now, Clara, before you grow too weary. Legal matters move faster with clarity." Adrian's voice followed smooth as a scalpel. "It's in your best interest. We can ensure every detail of your care is handled properly. You need rest, not responsibilities." My pulse hammered in my ears. The trap was tightening. Their smiles stretched thin, their eyes glittering with impatience. I could almost hear the clock tick, each second bringing the pen closer to my hand. Then knocking. Firm, authoritative, not the timid rap of a nurse. The door opened and the air shifted like a storm breaking through stained glass. A tall man entered, broad-shouldered, his gaze cool and cutting Ethan Ward. Behind him came a woman in a navy blazer, silver hair pulled back in a severe knot, her presence radiating authority. "Mrs. Whitmore will not be signing anything today," the woman declared, her voice resonant with steel. "I am Nora Delgado, chair of the hospital's ethics board. Effective immediately, all legal and medical decisions regarding her care are frozen pending investigation." The silence cracked like a whip. Amelia's mouth opened shut, then twisted into a sneer. Damien straightened his jaw, tight fingers curling around the case. Adrian's mask of serenity faltered, the faintest twitch at his temple betraying the man behind the facade. I felt my spine straighten against the pillows. For the first time in days, I wasn't merely enduring. I was witnessing a chessboard overturn. Amelia hissed, "This is absurd. She's our mother. We have every right." Nora cut her off. "Rights end where coercion begins, and I see plenty of coercion here." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but commanding. "Everyone stops talking. From this moment, every word is recorded. Every move will be examined. You wanted power of attorney." He leaned forward, his eyes drilling into Adrian's. "You may have just signed your own indictment." The papers on my tray lay untouched, silent as a tombstone, and for the first time I allowed myself a breath that wasn't drenched in fear. The game had changed. The hunters had been caught in their own snare. The room had become a stage, each of us trapped in its spotlight. Amelia's fury, Damien's clenched fists, Adrian's cracking mask, all circling me, the woman they thought too frail to fight. But I had carried the weight of silence long enough. It was time to turn the key. Slowly, I reached for my worn leather handbag resting on the table beside me. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of the recorder. I drew it out and placed it gently between the untouched documents and Nora Delgado's stern gaze. The tiny device gleamed like a blade. Perhaps I said my voice low but steady. We should all listen to what has already been spoken in this room when you thought no one was listening. A click. The red light blinked. And then the voices spilled into the silence. Damien's grating whisper, "As long as we get her signature, the house and accounts are ours." Amelia's silk-threaded venom, "Add more to the tea. She'll never know." And Adrian, his calm baritone turned sinister, "Tonight. It must end tonight." The sound filled every corner like smoke from a fire. Amelia's face drained of color, her mouth opening like a child caught stealing before collapsing into frantic pleas. "Mother, please, you don't understand. It wasn't like that." She pressed her palms together, tears brimming. "We just wanted to protect you, to help you rest." I stared at her, the girl I had raised as my own, her words twisting like knives. "Protection," I spat. "You call this protection?" Damien snapped his mask, tearing apart. "Don't blame me. It was her idea." His finger jabbed toward Amelia, his voice sharp with panic. "She's the one who wanted your house, your money. Enough." Nora's command cracked like a whip, silencing the room. But I wasn't finished. Ivy slipped in quietly, her hands holding a sealed evidence bag. She placed it on the tray before me, 2 vials amber liquid glinting beneath sterile labels. Alongside them, she laid down printed stills from the security footage, Amelia's manicured hand tipping drops into my tea. The room gasped, though mine was the loudest breath. Proof. Tangible, undeniable, a weight heavier than words. Jonas Becker stepped forward from the doorway, his uniform casting him in the glow of authority, and I can swear he said, voice steady. I saw Damien near the restricted medicine cabinets 2 nights in a row. He didn't belong there. He knew it. Damien's face contorted rage, eclipsing fear. "You think anyone will believe a rent-a-cop?" he barked, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Adrian, however, said nothing. He sank into the leather chair, his hands folded, his face ghost white. For a man who had spoken with the authority of life and death, his silence was louder than any scream. Nora Delgado turned toward him, her verdict cold as winter stone. "Dr. Kessler, you are hereby suspended from all duties pending investigation." The gavel had fallen. My predators, stripped of their disguises, now sat exposed in the harsh light of truth. For the first time, I did not feel like prey. I felt like a survivor holding the knife that had once been held against me. The echo of their downfall lingered long after the hospital room had emptied of its shadows. But justice, like music, requires more than one note. It demands a full composition. Months passed. The winter thawed, and with spring came breath again in my lungs. My body, once a prison of monitors and IV drips, found its rhythm. The heart that had faltered now beat steady, though scarred. I decided that survival was not enough. I needed to create something that would outlive the darkness. So one April evening, the old stone church in Riverside filled with candlelight and sound. I sat at the piano beneath the stained glass window, my fingers trembling not from fear but from anticipation. The hall was small, no grand symphony, yet every note felt like a hymn of defiance. I called it the Whitmore Harmony Fund. Every dollar Arthur had hidden away in that protective trust, every asset they tried to steal was reborn as scholarships for young musicians and protections for elders like me who knew too well the knife of betrayal. This was not charity. It was vengeance transformed into melody. Ivy sat in the front row, her dark eyes shining as I announced the first scholarship in her grandmother's name. She wept openly, unashamed, when I handed her the certificate. For courage, I said, my voice carrying through the vaulted ceiling, and for the bloodline of women who deserved better. Jonas stood awkwardly at the side, his security jacket exchanged for a clean suit. When I named him as a guardian, honored for his bravery, the crowd rose to its feet. His ears burned red, but his smile, hesitant boyish, was brighter than any candle. Margaret, my sentinel-in-law, remained composed but watchful. She still carried files under her arm, still spoke in clipped tones about courts and clauses, unwilling to let me drift into naivety again. Her presence reminded me that the war may be won, but battles always linger. As the final piece swelled a hymn my students once sang in chorus, I let my eyes close. For a moment, I was not the hunted woman in a sterile room. I was Clara Whitmore, teacher, musician, survivor. My life was not stolen. My voice was not silenced. And yet shadows remain. Damien did not crumble like Amelia, who begged for forgiveness before the jury. Nor did he wilt like Adrian, whose silence damned him more than words. Damien fled. The papers called it absconding, a neat word for a man who slipped into night before the verdict fell. His chair in the courtroom sat empty, a ghost of arrogance. Rumors whispered of him surfacing in another city using another name. I do not know if they are true. But sometimes, in the quiet of evening, when I turn off the lamps and the house settles into silence, I feel the weight of unseen eyes. Justice is never final. Music never ends. It fades. It lingers. It returns. And so as the last note of the concert dissolved into the rafters, I knew this was not an ending. It was only the beginning of another movement in a darker, longer symphony.